Hi, gorgeous. I love your glasses. They're the coolest glasses.
Oh, I don't know. I got them for just reading, lovely, because when my eyes were terrible last year, I couldn't read the computer. So
Oh, yes, of course.
yeah. So they said to me, you need different glasses. So got the funky ones. Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. So, um, oh, just hang on, I'll share. Hopefully, I'm sharing the right thing. Let
Yep,
me
I can
make
see that.
this go. So, can you still see the screen,
Yeah, you
smart
can see that.
directors?
Yep, absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, so welcome everybody that's joining in to our webinar. Um, and I know that there's a few people, I've got some people texting me right now saying that they're running a bit late, they'll join in, but we've got a few people here that I'd really like to, make sure that we get started on this webinar. So welcome to our Smart Director series. And today we're talking about everything that you need to know in order to create your A-list team. So today our guest is the wonderful Sharon Vandermeer, who is the director of On the Ball Personnel Australasia Proprietary Limited, and she has over 30 years in hiring and culture coaching. So welcome to Sharon, and I'm
Of
just going to
course.
stop sharing and so that we can have like a conversation about everything that we need to know for recruiting the the teams, like the amazing teams for our businesses.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so would you like to give us a bit of a rundown of who you are and why somebody should listen to this webinar?
Yeah. All right. So my name is Sharon Vandermeer, as Jules has said. I'm the director, founder of On the Ball Personnel Australasia. It's based here in Melbourne. And look, I've actually been recruiting for over 35 years. That sounds like I'm a dinosaur. But what I've seen is a number of iterations in this space, um, which has been amazing. So it doesn't always feel like it's the same kind of industry because it's really evolved
Mm,
from when I first started up on the ball. Look, I think the most important thing is when you are, a director of a company, you're pumped and you're excited to recruit talent, and it's getting clear at the very start of what that looks like because you've got this amazing idea and you want to see it flourish, and you're super excited. You've invested your time, your money, your energy, and you just want to see that come to fruition. So today is all about how people can take maybe being a solopreneur, maybe two people, and go, well, how do I make the greatest impact in my business by hiring really good talent to help, support that, grow, and develop that? Because what I do know is that when there's only one of you, you hit a glass ceiling and you cannot go any
mm.
further.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? And I think sometimes there's a bit of an urban myth out there for business owners where they feel like they have to be able to do it all. But what do you think about that as an urban myth? Like,
Yeah. And
mm,
look, I've actually probably been that urban myth when I
mm,
first started on the ball. Look, I definitely hired, the first couple of years it was a grind. I started on the ball when interest rates hit 17.25%. So clearly not a great
oh,
time to be hiring in this space. But look, it was great. It gave me, I was just full of like, I was super driven. I was absolutely believed in my purpose that I had for the business. And look, it did take 2 years to really work hard. And my first talent member was kind of like the office manager. So she ran all the payroll, did everything.
mm,
Um, and then, I did everything, like everything, the 360 and everything else on top of that. But what you
yeah, wow.
find is that when you are all to everybody, there is the big chance that you burn out very quickly. So as a,
Mm,
you know, you've got this wonderful idea, you're trying to launch it, but you're burnt out. So again, it goes nowhere. You need a really good team, and you need to work just in your zone of genius.
yeah. I really love it when you talk about the zone of genius, because so many people think that they have to be amazing at their bookkeeping and have to be amazing at their recruitment, have to be amazing at, all the compliance side of things, as well as figuring out how to find the right person, and and then they get to that end point, like you say, and they're burnt out. And the thing that they actually love and why they got into business in the first place, they're not even doing it. They're then it's probably only 20% of their day rather than 80%.
Absolutely. And I think,
Mm,
for a while, you do have to do that. When you're
mm,
starting a business, you've got your org chart, you
yeah,
are everything. But
yeah,
the most important thing is that the profits stay in the business. And the first
yeah,
time is that, you've got some profits that are sustainable month by month. You then go, great, I can scale. But I
yeah.
think sometimes I've found that people forget you can scale part-time. You can get
Yes,
part-timers in. And,
yes.
that is not as expensive. It's definitely a
Mm,
help. So to start from somewhere is to hire maybe somebody 15 hours a week as
mm,
opposed to 38, 40 hours a week, which is a huge expense.
yeah.
So to look at it, all different ways. And if you are aligned, with a good recruiter or a good hiring firm, they're the suggestions they'll give you,
Mm,
to help you along the way. And they should be adding that value to you. It should be giving you really good support in that space.
mm. So what if you so say you are looking to hire your first person in your business, what tips would you give, and what what areas would you tell somebody, warning, warning, stay away from?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, tell me what you think.
Yeah, that's a
Mm.
big question. So first, I think about the psychology of hiring, the
Mm,
psychology of creating a team. That for me is the
mm,
most important step. You know, there is no I in team. You must remember that. So if your psychology is it's us and it's me and them, then it will never work. If your
mm,
psychology is we are all on the same page, we are as a team collectively going to make impact, then that's the kind of psychology you need to have. You need to hire people that are so much better than you in different areas, like the bookkeeping,
mm,
like marketing, that they're absolute talents, they're guns, because that
mm,
is going to springboard you further. If you're somebody
mm,
who says, no, I've got to be, all, many to everybody, or I've got to be the top of the chain, again, that is the incorrect psychology to have. And you'll
mm,
find that people who hire like that are hiring people who are not going to step up and be absolute rock stars in that position. So
mm,
firstly, it's going, okay, what's my psychology? I want to build out a team. And what does that
mm,
team, feel like, look like? I want people who are super experienced and, and defining your culture. So first get understanding what kind of culture do you want? People use that word all the time, like, culture, smulture. It's like, okay, um, what does it actually look like and what does it feel like? So for me, I'd say things like, if you're looking for a high performing team to have a high performing culture, then you're looking at people who are really good at what they do. If you're
mm,
looking for someone, if it's an innovative culture, then you're looking for people who love innovation. You probably wouldn't hire somebody who wasn't very technical, who didn't love being innovative. They were actually quite stable in a job, but not particularly loving that space. So again, it's defining what does your culture, what do you want it to stand for? What do you want it to look like? What are the standards? And then deciding what is the position that's going to have the greatest impact for me in the business in moving us forward, moving that needle forward. So let's say hypothetically it was, an office manager. So it's like, okay, and getting really clear, and you just need a pen and a piece of paper. We do not need anything eloquent, but it's writing down, what do I need that person to do? What would be the major responsibilities that that individual would be doing?
mm,
Making a list. So easy now. And now that we have the beauty of AI, you could take that list and feed that into ChatGPT and they would formulate a job description for you. But it's got to be your content.
Cool.
It's not ChatGPT's content. They're just going to put the
Yeah.
bones of it all together and give you a job description.
Yeah,
Leave
right.
it on your desk, walk away, come back, put eyes on it again, make
Yeah.
sure it encompasses everything in the role. But it's also thinking of like, well, what would be the next step for this person? Let's say my business really scaled, where else could this person go in the company? So that you're thinking forwardly, you're thinking long game. Most people, when they want to join a company, want to join for because they want to make impact, but they also want growth and development. So if you
Yeah,
can
right.
think ahead of that and know, okay, the step up would be that they could move into my executive assistant role, or maybe they could move into an operations manager role, or maybe they're just the head of the whole organization, the general manager to IC to me when I'm not around. So it's
Mm,
thinking about what could that step be?
mm,
And then, it's also getting very clear, okay, this is my job description. So what skills do I need? And what level are those skills at? So if we worked looking at a bookkeeper, what kind of knowledge would I want them to have, say, on Xero? And then I'd probably think of some task-based things that I could give them to really check if they can
mm,
actually do all that stuff on Xero. It's one thing to say it,
mm.
it's another thing to be able to do it. And then I'd drill down on their experience.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying there with the checks and the balances, because so oftentimes you can have an interview with somebody, and I have a client who did this recently and, went through, had all the right answers for all the incredible questions that she had, that was going to make sure that her team that she hired was exactly the team that she needed. She went through all the values and all that sort of stuff. And then when the new team members started working for her, within a really short period of time, she's like, oh my gosh, how did I get this so wrong? So tell me a little bit more about like how you would battle test it, how you would test to make sure that what they're saying is actually like
Absolutely.
active. Yeah.
And most times when people hire wrong, it goes back to, what they didn't ask. It's not what they go,
Mm.
oh, look, I asked everything, but you've got to go a couple of layers down. So if I said to somebody, let's use the Xero example,
Yeah.
okay?
This
So,
is my
and
favorite program on the planet.
exactly.
Yes.
So if I said to someone, Jane, how often do you use Xero? So you want to
Mm,
work out, are they using it every day? Yes, I use it every day. Okay. When you say every day, could you just give me an example? Is that for
mhm,
half a day, just an hour? So you get very clear. I always build
mm.
the context out. These are layers and layers. And this shows a candidate too that you're very credible, you're very knowledgeable, you're asking a lot of stuff. You're not just going, oh, great, you use it, fantastic, thank you. They've got you.
Yeah.
You're going,
Yeah.
okay, how often? And tell me, what are you actually using? Are you uploading employees? What does a card file look like? You know, what
Mm,
and getting them to describe the functions that they do and how often they would do that function. Then I sometimes reverse engineer it and say to them, what have you not used on Zero that you'd like to learn? So then you get
okay. Yeah.
the gap. Oh, well,
Yes.
I haven't actually done X. Okay, great. Okay. Is it just something that you don't do in the business because using this kind of like the intermediate level and you just don't
Mm,
require to use advanced?
hmm.
Or do you see that coming up in the job where you're at? And
Yeah.
it gives them the opportunity to say, look, we just don't ever use advanced functions, but I'd really love to. I'd love to flex. I'd love to be
Mm,
taught that. I think I've got really good knowledge of Xero, um,
mm,
and they can go on. So you've
mm,
really got to have those questions prepared. You can't just wing it anymore. There's nothing worse than
mm,
somebody sitting there going, okay, what's the next question? Oh my God, what am I going to ask
mm.
them? You need to build that out. And then if it's like marketing, for example, or, using Xero, I'd also get them to do a task because, and a simple task. And when I say a task, it's not something you want to set them up for success. So you're going to give them a timeline to have it delivered by, be
Mhm.
very clear on what you want that task to be. So if it was something on Zero, you might say, look, I want to see you up, I'm going to send you all of this data and I want to see you upload that and maybe create, files or where that would actually
Mm,
be listed. And
mm.
that way they've got to get it back to you by a certain time. So what are you checking for? Okay, you're checking for
Yes.
a number of
Yeah.
things.
Okay. Yeah.
Because
So to expand that a bit, like you're not just asking what is your experience and then the candidate will say the answers. You're actually asking for them to um, give you real examples where they want to grow and also um, to demonstrate that they actually can do what they're saying that they can
yeah,
do. Yeah,
you're
right.
looking at the client
Mm,
from the candidate from a holistic perspective. What
yeah,
do you know? What do you
yeah.
don't know? And where would you like to go with that? So what does that
Mm,
tell you? I mean, it tells you their knowledge level, but it also tells you, are they really passionate about it? That's very, very
mm,
important. What does it tell
mm,
you? It tells you if they get it to you, if they get the task to you by a certain time, it tells you that a really interested, they're a really committed candidate. Because there
mm,
are only two, there's three types of candidates. The ones that are just not suitable for your role, so put them over there.
mm-hmm,
But these two are the trickiest ones who are very good, but they're only interested. And then you've got the
mm,
committed. So these two are
mm.
actually talent.
Yeah,
But you've
right.
got to decipher, who is on, who's got 2 feet on the bus and ready to go, or who's got one on the bus. And
Yeah.
I've got this job over here
If
and I've
it's a
got this
good
job over.
idea, yeah,
And
yeah.
if you give people deadlines, the
Mm,
ones that are interested rarely make those deadlines because they've got a lot
mm,
going on. They've got other jobs they're applying
mm,
for. So then
mm.
I don't ever pursue those
Yes, got
because they're
it.
they're going to pull out at some stage. They're just not reliable. So when
Yeah,
people show you who they are, please accept that as their truth. Or they're
yeah.
being authentic. They're still very good. They're just not going to be in your lane, on your bus. But the ones that are committed will usually have it back before 5 p.m. and then they'll follow up with you. But they're on. They want this job. They've selected it. So you need to move at a really good pace for them so they don't drop out through disengagement.
Mm. I think um, that's also a really good indicator for even your clients. Like if
Absolutely.
the client's really interested and engaged and committed, they're following you up. Because, like sometimes you can have so many things on and you miss it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's really important. Something that kind of triggered my memory as well of another conversation that we've had in the past was, um, you know, how people present themselves, even when you are ringing to put in an interview,
Yeah.
and like you said something the other week that was just really meant. You were saying something about if you call somebody and they answer the phone, oh hi,
Yes.
that's a boom boom for you. So can you tell us about this and explain
Yeah.
what you mean by it and tell our audience, because I think that was a really valuable insight, and it's also an insight for us as the potential, like,
Hire.
employer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So I look, for me, it's about, how we do one thing is how we do everything. And,
Mm,
if you're applying for job applications, the chances of somebody calling you are pretty high. So for me, it's like if you don't answer that phone with high energy, then you've lost me. Like I've had
mm.
people literally answer the phone going, hello. It's like I've woken them up. Now, I guarantee you, if that was Richard Branson calling them,
Yeah,
they wouldn't
yeah,
answer the phone like that.
yeah.
So the present, so they've got to be on. I find it really
Mm,
disheartening when I do find that people's voices, we did a video about it and it just, almost went viral because
mm,
so many people um, don't answer the phone really well. Now, if you're
mm.
applying for a senior position, like that's a tick. You've got to answer the phone. Imagine you've got a talent, you're supervising a team member, and they ring you up and you're like, hello, like, oh, you're so not interested in me or everyday life. Like, we're out. So whatever you
Mm.
do has a ripple effect. Um,
Yes.
and the other side is when people show up for interviews. Like I do a lot of Zoom interviewing, that is the space I'm in. And I always make sure, whether I've rushed into the office, I'll always have a jacket handy. So I pop that
Mm,
jacket on. I always want to look presentable. Okay.
mm.
I've had people turn up. I've had like people turn up in like a Nike t-shirt that's got marks on it. I've had somebody with bed hair. I've actually had somebody once wrapped in a blanket because they were so cold.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
I kid you not, they would never interview like that with Richard Branson. They would never
No.
interview like that for the job of their dreams. So why am I an
Mm.
exception? Because I could be a conduit to Richard Branson. Who
Mm.
knows? So
Yes.
I
Yes, you
always
never know
say
the opportunity. Like
that's
you never
his,
know the
yeah,
opportunity that you're potentially giving up
yep,
and the pathway for where you might be heading.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
I think that's the same in business as it is as hiring somebody. You know, if you're going to be working with a business professional or even any other
yeah,
business supplier, and they're like a bit mediocre on the phone, you don't
yeah.
really, your gut kind of squeezes a little, doesn't it?
It does. Like value
Yeah.
has got to come through.
Mm,
And,
mm,
look, my phone rings 24/7. I've had the same
yeah.
mobile number from the very first day I've got it. Now,
Yeah.
that could be my greatest client calling me. So if I sound like I'm
Yes.
just lying in bed or, I'm just not energized, then that's
Yeah.
perception. And we can't change perception. It's like a 2-second thing to form that perception. So I always
Mm,
say to candidates, make sure you've got a great voice manner, phone manner
yeah.
when you're looking for jobs. Make sure you show up really well on interview. And in
Mm,
Zoom, you've got to work harder to create that energy because it's a
mm,
screen. So you've got to be a
mm,
little bit more animated. You've got to make sure you smile more. You've got to
yeah.
sit there with a smile on your face. You've got to say, I'm really happy to be here. Like, this is a job
Yes.
that I want. And those
Yes.
that sit there, they're slumped over. I've had people with, cats walk behind them.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, you're a really good candidate, but can we just put the cat outside just for half an hour while we chat?
Yes.
I've had
Exactly.
people
Yeah.
cooking. I've had somebody,
Mm.
I've had an adolescent walk in and start yelling at his mother.
Oh my
Crazy.
goodness. Yeah.
It's like Zoom,
Yeah.
but for me,
Mm.
I like to describe doing a Zoom interview is literally like I picked up your chair on a face-to-face and just moved you to a screen.
Yes.
Nothing changes. Like your
Yes.
mom's not sitting in the background, your cats wouldn't go with you to the interview, and you
Yeah.
wouldn't sit at
Yeah.
my desk slumped over like, yeah, what's going on?
Mm,
You know,
mm,
but I've had it all. So
mm,
all of that, and they're little 1%ers that take people out. Because here's the thing.
mm.
Would you want someone answering the phone to your largest client like that? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Would you like them to be presented like that, slouched over as your account manager, selling your brand? I don't think so. So they're
Yeah.
all micro things, and I call them tells. They're all
Mm,
tells for me, whether somebody is, an interested or a committed candidate. A committed
yeah.
candidate has RSVP'd as soon as you send the Zoom link or the Teams link. They've already done,
Mm,
they've guessed who the client is and they've done research. They look $1 million and they've got
mm.
themselves really well organized. They've got good
Yeah.
questions asked. And they don't
Yes.
they don't sit there and go, now what was this job again? Like I've applied for 20.
Mm.
They don't
They
ask you
know
20.
exactly what they're looking at. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
And yeah, I think that's also, especially nowadays, like a lot of us professional, like if we're in the professional industry, we're doing the vast majority of our work on Zoom or Teams or one of those kind of
Absolutely.
mechanisms now. Um, but it's the same when you go into real life. You know, if you have a
Yeah.
real life interview, if you're doing some looking at working in a cafe or any of all of those sorts of things, it's about the presentation that you're bringing as you come forward. I think one of the other things that, so say you've already found the person, you think that they're the right person, but it's taken you so long as a small business owner to find somebody, and you're almost at the point that anybody will do. But what do you do when you've got your candidate and is such a shortage of um, people available? Say you're in a cafe, for example,
Mm.
and you haven't had many people apply, and you've picked the best of an okay bunch,
Look, I know that's really,
and then they rock up and they're beyond mediocre.
yeah.
But
And
you're
I'm not,
like, what would you do then?
yeah, and look, I know that's really gut wrenching, and we've had it
Mm,
too. We've
mm,
had it that we've advertised roles or we've gone to socials, and it's been one of those ones where you're just looking for the diamond in the rough, And
Yeah.
you know what? We're just getting stones with a little glimmer in there showing up, but we still haven't found that diamond. And I always say to people, don't go to the dark side, because the minute you go to the dark side and you take, you don't look for your A grade, rock star,
Mm.
and you're taking your B and C grade, that will show up in the way they are in your organization. Now, it's a fine
Yes.
line. So I do really relate and feel for businesses that are struggling to find that talent. But the talent will come. You just have to hold the line and, step away from the ledge and do not go to the dark side and take whoever comes along, because you
Yeah.
feel that. And think about that. If that is the wrong person, my question back to you would be, what is the cost of losing your top client, or maybe your top three clients? Because
Mm.
not just your time, not just your culture that starts to wobble with the wrong person, but your clients. Imagine they up and left. So what
Mm.
would that cost you? And that,
Yes.
if you get the wrong person, that is the price you pay.
Yes, yes. And look, I've been there in the past where I've hired some people that, they were the best I could possibly get in the region that I was working in. And yeah, it cost me tens of thousands of dollars just in rework
Yeah.
alone. But in terms of the cafe, and also like if it was a cafe person that has got somebody that isn't doing a really amazing job, then your customers just don't come back. Like if they're the
No.
next person, or
If they're not
yeah,
feeling
if
the
you,
wow factor, they will never come back.
yeah,
Like, why would they
yeah,
choose you, And that's a
yes,
really
yeah,
good question,
mm,
where we did a skit last week about, tell me, why should I hire you? That is a
mm,
really good question. It's a hard
yes,
question
okay,
to answer, but it's a really good
yes,
question. Now, I just want to
yes,
say that there is a caveat. So when people are
mm,
looking for skills, skills are one thing.
mhm,
But the one thing that you never ever compromise on is attitude. So your interview is split in two. When I say
mm,
split in two, firstly, I ask all the skills-based questions. Only then, if somebody has the skill level, do I move to what I call the values-based questions. Now, people call them behavioral, but these are about values alignment. Are they aligned with us in the way this company runs? That's what your million-dollar question is. So if somebody
yeah,
is a really good, it is a great values alignment and has like maybe medium or slightly a little bit of skill level, I feel like they're coachable and
mm,
coach somebody. Better to hire someone
yeah,
that's a little bit of stretch, because they
yes,
want that stretch, they want to be developed.
yes,
So that's
yes,
more important. So if you're in hospo, then I always say to people, you know what? Like, it's not a hard thing to deal with people or gather plates or multitask.
yes, yeah,
You can always battle test that if they've done that at school, work experience,
mm,
university, all of those communication sides of things. But what you're looking for is the attitude. That is
yes.
the secret ingredient. Because without that, I don't really care that you've, collected plates for,
Plates before.
yeah,
Yeah, you
exactly.
you
Or
want to know. Yeah, so I suppose in that instance, if it is say a runner or something like that, it's, well, do you drink coffee? Do you know anything on our list? So when they're delivering, they're actually saying the right coffee that they're delivering, or
yeah. So
and if they're not, like somewhere else in their life, that if it's especially if it's like a kid and their first
mm,
um like
first job.
job, yeah,
Yeah.
like you're you're really looking for that attitude of, I want to learn.
Absolutely. I want
Yeah,
to learn. But
yeah,
it's also,
mm,
there are lots of questions you can ask. People go, oh my God, how do I ask a values-based question? Well,
yes,
rule number one and rookie mistake number one is that you never ask them what their values are, because I could tell you
yes,
anything. I could tell you
yes,
I've got all these values, but it's a
yes,
contradiction of how I'm turning up. So
mm,
you want to check those values on what they've done or how they would do things. So I'll give you an example, and this is and sometimes it ticks off a few values at the one time. So most people's values are around things like respect, are you resilient, leadership, growth mindset,
mm,
innovation, we're family, all of that stuff. So they're often people's values. So it's asking questions. So for example, I had this person was 21. So it was actually his first job, first professional job. And he
Hmm.
had worked for retail. So he'd worked for Nike, and he'd done some other retail work.
Yes.
So he had joined a bank. And one of the questions that he was asked when he was moving to his next role was, give me an example when you've gone over and above for a fellow team member. What was that? And what was the
I
outcome?
do that. Yeah.
So his answer was, okay, he said, yep. He said, look, when I first started with the bank, we did a 6-week training program, and that training program was made up of myself, a couple of other people around my age group, but there was also a lot of mums returning to the workforce. And he said, we'd been doing training for about 3 weeks, and I was staying back making some notes. And one of the mums said to me, hey, Pat, I'm just going to say goodbye because I'm going to quit tomorrow. And he said, why? You're doing so well. And she said, no, I'm not picking up these systems. Like we're in now of like 6 or 7 different windows.
Mm.
I just don't have that technical ability. And I know some of the other mums here are also struggling. So he said, well, what if I stayed back? Are you guys open if I stay back and do some additional training? Like that's my strength. I'm really good with tech. Would that be helpful? Now, all of those mums stayed.
Mm.
They all passed, they all stayed, and that is a view. Now, that shows values of respect, of going above and beyond for a team member. It just shows a beautiful value
Mm.
system within that. Now, I'll tell you a little secret that was actually my son. Um, yeah, but
Yeah,
it was
but it's so like but that's so heartening, like
so heartening.
and who wouldn't want to hire somebody like that?
There you go. Because you know that that person, like sometimes people's values are, we've got each other's back. He would
Mm.
have someone else's back. That is the
Mm.
kind of individual he is. So therefore, he's
Mm.
very successful. But it was just a beautiful
Yeah,
thing that he offered. And that is an absolute true story. And
yeah.
another question to that was, another really good question to ask people is, what's been the greatest challenge that you've had working at an organization? What does that look like? And how did you manage that challenging
Mm.
situation? So it's really good to ask that information around that because again, that tells you, do they have grit? What was the process that they worked through? Now, I've actually had people go, yep, I had a real challenge and setback. I went for a promotion at the position and I didn't get that. And it's their loss. Their loss. They didn't see my value. So, their loss or
Yeah,
candidate
wow.
B, and that is a genuine
Yeah,
answer I've had, hand
yeah,
on heart.
yeah.
Or I've had candidate B said, yep, look, you know what? I went for a promotion. I didn't get it. I was so gutted. I fully prepared. It really hurt. But I went back to the drawing board and I said to my team leader, what am I missing? What can I practice on? Because I want that role and I'm prepared to
Mm.
have another crack at it. Now, there you
Yeah.
go. That's someone who's got great reflection. So we want to look at reflection. How did I show up? What could I do differently? Reflection takes responsibility, was super accountable, and again, has that really good resilience to go, I'm going to go again. I'm
Mm.
curious, tell me what I'm missing, because I'm going to go find it and I'm going to, crush that job. I'm going to get it. That's the
Yeah,
kind of
right.
person you want on your team. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of questions that, brings up some really good answers. And there are a
Mm.
lot of great questions that take people out straight away.
Yes, exactly. And I really like how you're expanding on that and giving some really good examples of candidates that, you know, I hope that everybody that's listening is getting some value in it. So some candidates that it's like, oh, if I had the choice between A and B, I would
Yeah.
be picking candidate B or candidate A, but then also reflecting on themselves and going, well, if I was the boss or if I was the person reflecting, like, is that
Yeah.
which candidate am I being? So in my day-to-day world and my success trajectory. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
I always
So
say to I always say to clients, look at the candidates that have an answer with depth. It's easy for someone who's going for a customer service role and they go, what motivated you to apply for this role? Oh, I love customer service. Okay,
mm,
that's just cliche. They might
mm,
still be a fantastic, candidate, but the candidate says, you know what? I'm actually really good at customer service. I've got a good background in that, but I want to take it to the next level. I want to really ramp up my experience because that is that's my zone of genius, and I want to stay in
mm,
that lane. Now that's an
mm,
answer with depth, and you can see
mm,
the authenticity come through. So
mm.
I often say to people, be very careful of people who've gone to ChatGPT or to Google and they've Googled what are the most common interview questions asked, and they will
Yes,
just give you an answer. That is not
yes.
authenticity. So ask them different questions,
Mm,
questions that they don't expect. So if you had a salesperson, one of the questions I like to ask that have not turned up on Google searches, I haven't fed into ChatGPT, but things
good
like,
job.
yeah, but to say to someone, sales is your passion, which, I can hear. So tell me, who do you follow on YouTube, or what book have you read, or what's been the most, or who is your mentor in this space so that
Mm,
you're up to date in what's happening, in the sales world and you're keeping your skill level up. And if someone says to
yeah,
me, no, I don't follow anyone, then that
yeah,
tells me it's not a passion.
yes,
When you
yeah.
are into something, whatever you can get your hands on, but there's
Go for
always
it.
somebody that you're following that you go, I
Yes,
love the way they sell. Like they've got it going for them. If I could just put that into my sales spiel, I would get that $1 million contract. I'd ace it. So
yeah,
there are little tells, always little tells.
yeah. That's amazing. Okay, so what else? Because I know that we're starting to get close to Q&A time. So what else do you think that we need to know if we're creating that A-list team that we
Yes.
haven't yet covered?
Yeah. So probably the biggest thing is that, you've worked out your psychology, you know exactly, why you're hiring, the importance of an A grade team. You've got your job description, you've formulated all your interview questions and your recruitment process, and you've got somebody there and you've asked all the intel. But you want to check that intel. You want to go, yeah, you know what, I'm pretty good. I've asked some really good interview questions. But how do I actually know it's true? So you want to make sure you reference check. And I've
Mm,
got a hack. So people go, oh my God, reference checking, Sharon, but it's going to be Bob the neighbor. They're just going to fake it.
yes.
Now,
Yeah.
we do get a lot of fraudulent references. Absolutely. So you are
Yeah.
correct in assuming that.
Mm,
But if you make sure that they are someone they reported to in an organization and you get them to send you a validated email signature that they are,
mhm,
in fact, Joan, the office
mm,
manager or the operations manager who supervised this individual, or you'll
yes.
go to LinkedIn and have a look at their profile and chronologically see that they were the ops manager at the time that this employee was
And this
there.
person was there. Yeah.
And if you can kind of sneak it through, if they're a smaller organization, sometimes you can call up and say, hey, I just want to double check, if Joan is in fact the operations manager. Now, if they're not
Mm,
over privacy, they'll say, yes, she is. But if they're privacy, they'll say, who's asking? And you'll need to put that in writing. It's a try, but you need to
yeah.
validate it. But you also need to be as specific in your information you're asking as you were in your interview questions. So, Joan, Jack said that he uses Zero. So tell me, how many times a day did he use Zero? And what was he actually putting onto Zero? What was he actually feeding into Zero? And, where do you feel that he needed to perhaps, brush up his skills more in Zero? What was an area that he was falling below the yellow line? Okay, great, he wasn't. All right. So how would you rate him out of 10? Okay, 7.5. Excellent. So
Mm,
what's the 2.5 we're missing?
2.5. Yeah. Yeah.
And why do I ask that
Yeah.
question? Because I go,
I
well,
like that because
yeah,
some people will say I never give
a
over
10.
a 10 or because I always was one of those people that never used to give a 10 and then
Yeah.
had a couple of people challenge me on that recently and I've gone, huh, yeah, I never do give a 10.
But you
So
shouldn't give a 10, Jules, because here's the
yeah,
thing. We are
yeah,
never a 10 out of 10. There's always some
yeah,
part of our job that needs improving. So if that is a
yes,
really accurate resume, a
mm,
reference check, I should
mm,
say, then there
yeah,
should be an area that they need to improve on.
Yes.
And it's up to you to decide, okay, do I want to invest in that or not? Should never be a
Yes.
10 out of 10. If someone gives me a 10 out of 10, I feel like there's
Yeah.
something not right. And I'll go and get
Yeah.
an
Or
additional
then
reference.
the standards are low. Yeah.
But when you
Yeah.
find that
Mm.
2.5 gap, you say that's when it opens the Pandora's box slightly, okay?
Mm.
Where they go, yeah, look, they did everything on zero, but I had a little bit of pushback. They got really defensive. So
Mm.
sometimes when you say, well, why the gap? Now they might say what you do. Well, I don't feel like anyone is worth a 10 because they're always a work in progress. I take
Yeah.
that. But that also 9 times out of 10 opens up a gap for me where they say, yeah, look, they were good. They did zero and stuff, but we had some real issues around reliability and punctuality. So it just
Mm.
allows more intel to come out where you can still go away and go, okay, this is my interview data. This is the reference check data. There are a few gray areas here. Perhaps this isn't the recruit for us. Perhaps this
Mm.
is not our next hire. Let's go to the next one. Or you might choose to do another reference check.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you compare
And
data with data.
yeah, yeah. And like I'm just hearing all of that. That's a lot of work to do for hiring somebody.
A lot.
So and like I know that this is your zone of genius as well. Um, when do you think that it's, for us, if we're talking about a really small business, when do you think it's appropriate to go, you know what, this job is so high stakes, I need to have the recruiter,
Yeah.
somebody
Look,
like your skill. Mm,
yeah. So look, most founders and CEOs I find are not
mm,
good. They're not good. That's not their zone of genius. So
yes.
they either decide that they hire someone who's going to be talent acquisition, and
Yeah.
that's their zone of
Yeah.
genius, that's their baby.
Yeah.
And that, they choose to either get them to recruit or they work with a recruiter. Look, I think,
Mm,
you know, for me, it's a craft. You've just seen, I've
mm,
given you the tip of an
mm,
iceberg today. It is
yes.
actually a craft to hire really well. And then
Yeah.
we're not always 100%, but we are 95, 98%
Yes.
all the time. So I have the data to
Yes.
produce that. But that's my zone of genius. So I will see things that you miss because it's not yours. And
Yeah.
you're running an empire. So you've got
Yeah.
this much time to dedicate. I've got this much
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
You need to understand how to do it from the back end. So I love working with founders and CEOs who go, I trust you, Sharon. You give me a short list, and then I will go through, and I also educate them how to ask questions on their end so they understand, because they still have to interview from their end, their perspective.
Mm,
That's my perspective, that that person's great. So I
mm,
think, if when is that? I think when they realize that that's not their zone of genius, and it's a good way to outsource it, get some really top talent in. They'll then start bringing in, more business, bringing in more profitability. And then before you know it, you've got yourself like a really good team that you can rely on. And then you've got the next stage. You've got to onboard them well, retain them well, and
yes.
maybe talk about exits. I have a totally
Yeah.
different perspective on, I always want to know when someone's exiting my business. So I talk about it all the time. Anyone
Yeah.
feeling like that they're looking elsewhere, they're being approached, how do you feel? Because
Yeah.
people are not with us forever. They're
Yes.
just on loan. And, I want to make sure I've got a contingent plan, or I'm having those open conversations with my talent. What else do
Yeah.
you need to stay? What's going to stretch you? Or and allow me that right of reply. Or
Yeah.
maybe I'll cross train someone. So if Jack decides that it's definitely time to go, Jane is sitting on the bench and she has shadowed him and she can move
Mm,
straight into that position.
yeah. 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 Got it.
So there's a lot.
Amazing, amazing. There's so much. There's like my brain is just going 100 miles an hour, and just I'm learning so much from you. As always, every time I have a great conversation with you, I feel like I've learned some more things and even some insights for myself, as an employer. So I'm just going to throw it out there. I don't know if any of our webinar friends have any questions. If you have a question, please, I think on Zoom you can raise your hand, and then I can
Even if they
help
have a
you
previous
out.
hire that hasn't worked out, you want to dissect that,
Yes, yeah,
that'd be great.
that, yeah, I think. Yeah.
So I think, is it Ali that's raised her hand?
I can't see if she's raised her hand, but Ali, you can unmute if you've got. How did you see that she raised her hand?
She's
These are
got
new
a little
things.
hand there. I don't know if it's a raised hand
Ah,
or is it
yeah.
Laura? I'm not sure.
I can't see. They all on mine are showing. Oh, I think it's the
Yeah.
way
Oh,
that.
no question from me.
No
So
question. Yes. Sorry. Thanks, Ali. Well, let's talk about one of my clients who did actually have the wrong people move into their business. So they asked all the questions that they thought they needed to ask, and I think it was more on the technical side of things because her role in the business is a very technical role, and she was hiring little mini hers.
yeah.
Um, and within a couple of weeks, she realized that one of the employees just didn't want to do the workload that was expected, and also wasn't working really well with the other people. Seemed to be already starting to create a bit of anxiety, a little bit of
The friction.
friction. Yeah, and it just wasn't
Mm,
easy, simple, and fun, which
yeah.
we're always aiming for. So, what would be your advice on how to debrief that? How to look at, well,
Mm,
how did I miss all those tell signs,
mm,
and how can I ask the questions that might help
yeah.
me see them before I hire the person? Mm,
I love the debrief. We've all obviously
mm,
learnt that at K2, which has been amazing, but I think it's
mm.
really great. So what was our objective was to hire a skilled,
Yeah, a skilled
book,
professional, or
skilled
yeah, let's just say
professional.
that. Yeah,
Yeah, a
yeah.
skilled professional, and have them, onboarded into the business by XYZ
Mm,
date because it's a SMART goal.
mm,
So
mm,
what's the result? That's a no. What was the reason? So running through the reasons. So going back, I would say in their instance that they didn't layer specifically down. And I
mm,
definitely think there's probably they maybe haven't identified, not knowing who this client is, they don't know what their values are. So therefore there's a values disalignment with somebody who's
mm,
creating friction, they're already a bit difficult to work with. That for me is an attitudinal issue. And so there's no values alignment there. But
mm,
taking all of what they did, I would imagine they haven't reference checked at that really deep level either.
mm,
Because here's what I know is that when somebody has, runs late to work or doesn't fit in with the team or whatever, there's always, that they haven't just started doing that. There's always a track record of that. So you need
yeah,
to do the
okay.
reference check. If somebody has started to have punctuality issues, it will not be just now. There would be definitely historical data in their references that would back that up. And I am yet to find where that is not the case, unless
Mm,
something's happened to somebody, but that's usually a talent. And we've all done it. We've all had great talents who suddenly, hit, divorce or something's happened in the family, an illness, and they will fall off, the radar for a bit, but that's okay. That's where we step up and support them as employers because they've been amazing and we help
mm,
to guide them through that. And hopefully they come out the other end just as super as they were at the start. But
yeah.
if somebody is just starting and that onboarding period is that is the time where you are assessing them the whole time, assessing them. So having a really good onboarding process is mandatory. It is essential.
Mm,
Number one, if anyone is a talent and you're not giving them feedback, you're not showing them where everything is, there's something not laid out, there's not a process laid out, they're gone. They'll just
yeah,
leave.
right.
Because Joan down the road, Joe blogs down the road will, and they'll be better off there. So you
Yeah.
need to have that built out. But the beauty of having a really good onboarding system is that each week you're checking in and you're giving them feedback and they're giving you feedback. And if you
Mm,
can even put a buddy system in, if it's a big organization, so they're getting a different buddy every week. Now that's someone that they can go to if they've got a question or they need to know some data or whatever, that's their buddy for the week. Their buddy
yeah.
will come back to you, give you as a CEO feedback, and then you would speak to the new talent, get their feedback, and also say, we feel like this part you're doing exceptionally well. Like you've picked it up
Yeah.
super duper well. But here we think you're falling below the yellow line. So what do you need from us to get you above that? What other training could we give you? So
Mm,
now,
yeah, okay.
after the fourth week, if they're not working out, If they're still not being able to get above the yellow line, it's time to move them out.
So, wow. So within 4 weeks,
Well, it
you
depends
think?
on the position.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
definitely depends on the position. But if you
Yeah.
are monitoring it really quickly, then
Mm,
really it's anywhere between the 4 to 8 weeks. If that person
mm,
is not right, then
mm,
there's a whole, number one, you've documented everything. There's a whole chain of, meetings and support that's
mm.
been given. And you need to know when enough is enough. This
Yeah.
person's a person at the end of the day. So when you get to the 8 week and they're still not picking things up, it's diabolical for their confidence. And they're not a
Yes.
bad talent. They're just not picking up the information. And if anything,
Yeah.
it comes back to you where you go, well, I actually didn't drill down on that skill if they had that
Mm,
skill at the level I need. So I need to take some responsibility for that. But
yeah.
it's most times when you're putting someone, under that sort of like, and I wouldn't say scrutiny, but you are tracking them closely, they will
Mm,
most times deselect at that stage
yeah. Right.
because they'll
Well,
go,
that's
I'm genuinely not getting it. So Laura's got a question, which is good.
Laura. That's amazing. Yes, I'll ask you to unmute Laura so that you can talk to us. Hi, Laura.
Hey, how you going?
Hey,
Yeah,
Laura.
really awesome.
Hello. I just thought it was a really good opportunity. I've actually got a meeting tomorrow with one of my new hires that we've got in place, and I really want to approach the meeting in a really informal, conversational way, but I want to have some really good tactical questions available. She's been with us probably for almost, late December. She started with us, I think it would have been. So I just want some good questions that I like, open questions where I can really let the person give feedback to us on our training processes and how things are going. And I'd love some pointers on what to ask.
Yeah. Look, I think that's a fantastic question, Laura, because as companies, we're always learning. And I
Mm,
love a company that's open to say, look, this is our process, but maybe it needs to be tweaked. And the best people to tell us that will be any new hires that come in. So, look, I would ask things like, you've been here 4 months, we absolutely value you and, we'd love your intel if I'm really curious to find out, how's the whole process been? And we're really open to, I think the one thing you've got to create, and you're very good at that, Laura, is creating that safety. That's definitely a core strength of yours, that beautiful, safe, it's okay. None of this is going to be held against you. But I think the the conversation would be about this is a safe environment. We're looking for feedback. And, whether that feedback is good, bad, or otherwise, that gives us an opportunity to course correct. So, you're valued here and your opinion's really valued. So I would love it if you could give us, what you think we did well and where you think we need to improve more. What could we do better? Because we're growing and moving and we want to make sure that we are always looking at our processes and that we're up leveling wherever we can.
Beautiful. That's wonderful because that's definitely sort of the approach I wanted to take.
Yeah.
And I know, like, I've learned a lot around. We used to have a very formal process when it came to recruiting, and I've even at the end of the process, learning that it's very conversational. You get a lot more out of people when
Mhm.
it's more of a conversational approach because you can sort of find body language changes and those sort of things and then really hone in. So I'm looking forward to being in a really neutral state tomorrow and having those conversations and seeing what comes of it. So,
Because people think about so it's so good. Like you know, that's the kind of environment, they're the clients we love to work with because that for me is somebody who's got great psychology around their talent. It's a team. You're building a really robust, incredible team that you love working for and you're trusting the business to. So, that is a strategy, is having conversations. But remember, your talent have come from outside areas and there will be triggers coming in because they've never been treated like that before. So if
mm,
there's a bit of a barrier that comes up, you might need to work a bit harder just to get that down. Because, I've worked with companies. There is definitely a difference working with companies who understand that to mindset companies who have like, you're just not doing the job properly. Like,
mm.
we're pretty good. We've got everything right. We don't need to improve anything. Like they're not open and there's no safety created. So there's definitely those companies out there,
yeah,
too many of them still, which is why we do our
that's
scripts.
yeah, that's good because that reinforces. I actually one of the things that had been picked up with my team was the lack of ability, not ability, but the lack of wanting to ask for help from this person. And
Mm.
looking at prior engagement for this person, I can see that maybe it's come from a place where she didn't feel safe to ask for help. And so I really want to reinforce that we are a safe space. So that's really good too. So
Yeah.
that will make
And
sense.
and to say,
Mm,
you know, we see it differently. When you're asking for help, we see that, you know, that shows us that that's a leadership quality within you.
Yeah.
It's not a weakness. That is a leadership quality saying,
Yeah.
hello, I need some help. I mean, who here running a company hasn't asked for help? Okay. I've
mm.
asked for help multiple times. So
Yeah.
that's, you know, if you
Yeah.
reframed it to her to say, we actually see it as a leadership quality that you're able to ask for help. And, you know, if you were talking to anyone here and they were struggling, what would you say to them?
Mm.
You'd recommend that they ask for help as well, because it's actually a major strength.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank
But
you.
you're very welcome, very welcome. Thanks
And
for asking a
thank you for
question.
that.
Love
Yeah,
all the
thank you for
questions.
that question. That was such a good question, Laura.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and I think sometimes as well that can also be a cultural thing, because
Definitely.
like yeah, like I know that a lot of my team is based in the Philippines, and I'm so grateful for them. And originally, when they started working with me, they were like, "What? I can't possibly ask you. You're the boss, you know." And then I would go over and see them and have fun and do silly things, and they'd go, "Oh, you're a human. You're not just like the boss."
Yeah,
And then it opened it up a lot
yeah,
more. So I think sometimes it can also be a cultural thing that can really, impede people from asking for help, or the history of if they have asked for help,
yeah.
they've been shot down. So that's a really great insight. Thank
Mm.
you so much for sharing that for all of us here. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
it's
And I
amazing.
think it's about setting the standard. So, you know, when we set up companies, you know, we love to have all the policies and procedures in place, but it's like, you know, what's the standard we always want to uphold in this business, and actually mapping that out so that
Mm,
that's the line we always want to hold. Now, in that, it might be that, you know, this is a really safe environment and always demonstrating that. And, you know, we look at, you know, anybody reaching out asking for help is such an asset to this business. So trying to change all that language so that people see that. And then they go, okay, it's all right if I say I'm not coping with this. This is too much for me, because you know we've all been in environments and we've all worked for companies where the culture was like, that is a huge weakness if you haven't got it together, or how that was dealt with was
yes.
never dealt with in a very safe way. Now,
Yeah.
that is a fine line between enabling and supporting. It's a very fine
Yes.
line, but just to get people to start reaching out, get used to that rhetoric, is from the top down, you know. And if
Mm,
you say, I ask for help all the time.
yes.
Always use
Yeah.
yourself as an example. And if you can think of something that is an absolute dead set real example, you know, because I often say to my team, you know, the first thing I say is we've got to make sure this CRM's up to date, guys. And I
Mm,
will take hand on heart that I have not updated it the last 3 weeks. So it's my bad, but I'm
mm,
just going to say I'm taking responsibility. So how about
yeah.
we all do that? I always
Yeah.
lead with myself. Most times
Yeah.
I'm to blame anyway. So,
We are our worst enemies
well,
in
we just
business, I
mirror
think. But
stuff.
yeah.
You've got to, you know,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Definitely.
it's
Definitely.
it's a bit like that mirroring thing. You know, if you want
Mm,
people to reach out and ask for support, as leaders, we need to ask for
mm,
support. We need to demonstrate that. Now, that might
mm,
be that you're asking for support, you know, to your other leadership team. Help me with this. You know, I'm struggling
mm,
with this. That they
mm.
see that you're asking for that support. And then, you know, they will then go, oh, wow, she's able to do that. Maybe we'll do that. So it's all that mirroring. It is a mirror. There's no doubt.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much, Sharon. We've got to come to the end of this beautiful
Oh, went
time
so
together.
fast. Went so
It
fast.
always goes so fast.
Yeah.
I really do appreciate you taking the time and talking to us. And I know that we've got quite a few people that signed up that said that they couldn't make it, and please send the recording. So I'm just really grateful to have you here. And I'll just quickly share for everybody when I
Super
figure
welcome.
out. Um, I'll just share. So if you ever need to get in touch with Sharon, this is how you can get in touch with her. So her email address and her mobile. So yes, so thank you so much again. Thank you everybody for joining us.
My
And
pleasure.
I really am so grateful. So we'll
No, I'm
see.
so grateful for the opportunity, Jules. Thank you. It was great. Whenever I talk about this, you can tell you get into flow because it's like it seemed like 2 minutes ago. So that we
Yeah.
just started. But yeah, great
So
to see
yeah,
everyone. Thank you so
yeah.
much.
Thank you. Goodbye. Have
Bye.
a good evening. Bye.
Bye.